well, it's time for us to glue up the deck timbers, you know, out of these laminates that we ran through the planer. The first thing I can say is that when Ken and I ran these laminates through the planer, we were a little concerned about the thinner ones, that they might blow up in the planer, and actually they probably would have if we didn't run them through on a piece of plywood. So, you know, the laminates came out beautiful, and it was a great thing for us to do. It's a little break away from working on the boat itself, you know, but the idea was that we had to build a bench for planking. We had all these things under the bench and everything. We had to move them, and we decided if we're going to touch them, we're going to process them into something, because otherwise you're just moving things around the shop. And this shop's a little tight, so, you know, that was the idea, and we're getting it done. And we've got a crew here. We got Matthew and Vicky and Melissa and Ken and Beth, so they're the glue people right there. You know, I didn't think there was any need for me to be around when all that gluing was going up, so, you know, it's worked out really well. We've got a number of them made, and there's a few left, so, you know, it's a pretty good setup. And we selected all of this lumber out of the laminates that we had. Some of them weren't good, and we discarded them, but they're basically select pieces for these deck timbers. And the other thing I have to say about these deck timbers is that I've seen deck timbers made out of everything in sight, you know, from pine, which is ridiculous, you know, to oak, to all kinds of stuff, and mahogany and everything else, but most all of them that I've seen were sawn out. And I didn't like that, because if you get a piece of like oak, and you saw it out, it springs, it edge sets itself. So when I saw deck timbers out of something like that, I saw them out like 3 times, you know, a little too wide, and then saw them out again and out again, and every time you put that same pattern on there, it doesn't match up. So to save us all of that trouble and all that money for oak, which is fairly expensive these days, we've decided to use the laminates from the strip planking. And that's one of the reasons why we kept the planking. I remember when we were planing it out and sawing it out and resawing. It was the resawing process that we were concerned with, because we wanted to make sure that we had something left for deck timbers. We were going to have scrap. So if we had ripped the strip plank into 1 3/4 inches, well, then we were going to get 1 3/4 laminates for the deck timbers. We didn't want to do that, so what we did is we resawed it while it was still 4 inches wide, and then we cut it down to 2 inches. So we had these laminates 4 inches wide. Fantastic.
So we're here at Bristol Shipwrights, and I'm not Louis Sauzedde. Lou couldn't be with us today, but he thought, you know, we could probably handle this on our own because it involves a lot of glue and laminates. So this is kind of the second part of the deck beam video. We're gonna make a deck beam in this video and show you how a lot of people, because we have a big crew today, are gonna use these laminates and then glue them all together and clamp them, so we end up with our finished deck beams made from the scrap from the strip planking. So that's what we're going to do today, and we'll get Lou's approval on it later, and we'll start now. So the first part of making deck beams is pretty much you need to mix the glue. And if you're going to mix glue, what you should really have is a quality control engineer, because then you know the glue will kick and it'll be mixed properly.
He just wanted somebody else to blame if it didn't kick.
This is so I sleep at night and Ken doesn't.
I don't.
So this is Ken Hayes, and Ken Hayes has been here long term on this project since the very beginning years ago. And he still comes back, and whenever there's glue to mix, he mixes the glue. We let him do it, and then it comes out right every time. We try to help him a little bit by using a 2-to-1 mix. Pumps are just too slow, really, when you're mixing a lot of glue like this. So mixing a 2-to-1 in pots makes it a little easier to mix.
Yeah, it was like never-ending pumps with those.
With pumps, right. So this is the way we mix the glue. So we're going to just show you Ken mixing glue. I'm going to step out of the way and let him mix, and then we're going to move back to the mold, and we'll see the people who are all going to show up to put the laminates on the mold.
So for the glue, 2-part resin and hardener, and over time we figured out that you have to label everything. The resin stick is marked with an R, hardener stick, even the mixing sticks. And you got to make sure you never mix the pots. So marked it with resin, marked the fill spot, and you can use using these graduated containers it makes life really easy. So we've got it all 1 pot measured out already for resin, and the hardener is topped up as well. And then it's just a matter of dump and stir. Just gotta make sure you get all the resin out, because if you leave too much back in the pot, then the ratios are off balance. Never mix the sticks, because then you'll start kicking in the pot. When you first start and everything's poured in, it's going to be a bit cloudy. And after you've mixed it together for a bit, it's almost like it's water with air entrained. So you got to be sure to grab it from the sides. You don't want any just lone hardener sitting in the pot at all. You can see there's still a few streaks in there, so it takes a couple of minutes. You just got to stir. And you're never going to get rid of all the air bubbles because it's just too viscous for that. That's it. It's ready to go. So then we'll fill the thin tray, and then have to start mixing again immediately, because they'll need more thin. And then we'll take a portion of the thin, throw it in the thick pot, and add some filler to thicken it up.
So here we are, we've got our glue. Ken has mixed all the glue up for us, and everybody's at work. So we've got people spreading over there in the trough. We've got people spreading thin epoxy, just straight epoxy as it's mixed. And then we have puts here, and then we have two other people, Melissa and Matthew, who are going to apply thickened resin to each of the layers before we put the layer on top of it. And that's really it. And with so many people here, that's my wife, my long-suffering wife, Vicky, there. And then Beth Hayes, who's Ken's wife, who was also one of the original glue people. Melissa Conlon, who you've met. And Matthew Gabrilowitz, who's also long-term, has been here since the beginning and before the beginning of the build. So I'm going to step aside because I can go drink coffee and let them make a deck beam.
It's so shiny, it looks dry.
You know, and Ashley's a little older, and who else did I
Had those bumpers on the fenders on the side, you know. They never should have done that.
So what's the story?
Yeah, he can talk.
And he looks at me. And he,
You know, just if you like to sail at night.
Yeah. It's so much less congested.
So typically what we would do now is we'd be starting to set up the second deck beam to glue to at the same time, and we'd use the squeeze out again so we don't have a lot of waste. But in this case, because we're making a video and we want to get to the clamping business, we're going to start that right now. So we have a covering board over here Matthew has, and what we're doing is we take the covering board, and it has packing tape on it, like the mold has packing tape on it as well. And we're just going to set this right on the top so it covers both of the ends. It's made for the longest beam and sits on top. And then we'll take clamps, C-clamps, large clamps, whatever we have, and we'll open those up, of course, so they reach from the bottom of the mold to the board that we're using as a covering board, making sure that we've got the laminates against the thing. And we'll start from the middle a little bit, and then if you hand me one of those red and black handle clamps, we also have some blocks that have tape on them as well, and we'll clamp the block. We'll clamp the block to the side like this to squeeze the laminates together. Again, I think in the previous video we did on this, this isn't incredibly critical because we're going to plane one side with a hand. We're going to plane one side with a hand planer, right? And then we're going to resaw the beam, and then we'll run the other side through the planer so that they'll come out to be the 3-inch dimension. Right now the width is about 3 5/8, 3 1/2, and they're going to come down to exactly 3. So we have room to go. But again, just to make sure that we get good squeeze out and that the laminates are pretty much stacked properly. So if we work from the center out to the ends, we'll do a better job probably of keeping our laminates aligned and make sure that our covering board as well as, Matthew, maybe you could hand me one of those clamps. Because we have thickened glue as well as the thick glue, the thicker glue tends to kick a little faster, so it's kind of important to work fairly rapidly. Frankly, we haven't, even in doing things like making floors where we had a lot more glue than this to make the fiberglass floors, we haven't had a problem with it kicking too soon. Yeah, I guess the expression that everyone knows who does some kind of woodworking is that you can never have too many clamps, and laminating is exactly one of those jobs where it would be almost impossible to have too many clamps. And one more. And then just back over it one more time to make sure that everything is good. We can look at the laminates. Looks like we have a little space here. You can move your clamps to one side. If they're deep enough, you can move your clamps to one side or the other. If it looks like you have a laminate that's too cupped, that doesn't want to sit down properly. So that's the process. You know, we seem to get pretty good squeeze out everywhere. We can move the clamps around and add clamps as needed if we didn't get perfect squeeze out. Some of the laminates were a little cupped, but I'll show you some of the finished deck beams, and we've had pretty good success so far with making sure that everything is tight and solid. So I'm just going to show you some of the deck beams, the different stages they're at that we've already finished, and then we're going to wrap up gluing deck beams from laminates. So we just finished up making the deck beam inside, and we've got 3 done already, so there's only 37 more to go. Fortunately, a lot of the deck beams, because of the house, are only about 3 feet long. So we're moving right along as far as I'm concerned, and if we actually resaw to do deck beams, we'll make our laminates a little thicker, so we won't be using so much glue. And that's it. And I guess we all hope that we'll see Lou next time.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're back at the shop, and this is what we found. The deck timbers all glued up. It was a great thing to have somebody else do it. I didn't want to get involved with all that glue if I could help it, and I'm exposed to it on a daily basis usually, so this was quite a bit of rolling out of glue, and I think that it worked out really well. The people that we had on it, gluing and rolling and all those things, have got quite a bit of experience at it, really. They've worked on the hull, and it's just great. Now, I do want to show you how stiff these deck timbers are. I don't think you could get it any stiffer than this, whether it's oak or not. They do have some flexibility, but it's a very small amount. Now, I'm going to put my 140 pounds, which is just about all I weigh on top of this deck timber. And see, I can flex it, but it is a very minimal amount. Like I said, any other type of material, whether it was oak or mahogany sawn out or just about anything, is not going to have the stiffness that this deck timber has. Now, the glue people are gone, and they all left together because they're all glued together. And, you know, so how in the world they got themselves apart is beyond me.